President Donald Trump has been in the White House for a little over a fortnight. In the last 2 weeks, he's threatened Canada and Mexico with tariffs. He's warned Panama of a takeover of the canal. He's eyed Greenland, which belongs to Denmark. But his newest move could be his most controversial one yet.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
Trump wants the United States to take over the Gaza Strip and to move out nearly 2 million residents into neighboring countries like Jordan and Egypt. He's made it sound like a real estate project, but it could be far worse. Trump has said he was never in favor of starting wars. In fact, his whole election campaign was premised on this. In his first term, he became the only US president not to launch any new wars in the 21st century. And he's spoken about against the US fighting in forever wars, the 20 years of fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq that we've seen in the 21st century. But the big question we're asking today is he thrusting the US into a new forever war in the heart of West Asia? Is this yet another Trump bargaining tactic, mentioning the unthinkable and then settling for something less, something that he's done with Canada and with Mexico in the last couple of days? Joining me to discuss this very unprecedented turn of events in West Asia are Itai Melchior, Savio Rodriguez, and Major General Sanjay Meston. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Itai, the US, I want to start by asking this. The US has always been removed from West Asia. It's been there, but yet it's not been there. It's always been Israel that's leading the turn of events in West Asia. But what we saw a few hours ago was President Trump literally launching the United States into the heart of the issues in West Asia, into the Gaza Strip, positioning the US as a major stakeholder in West Asia. Is the US directly getting into West Asia for the first time?
Well, U.S. has many interests in the region, of course. Remember, Trump has a lot of policy around energy. And
Yes.
of course, the Middle East is an important part. What you call West Asia is an important part of the world when you talk about energy. Saudi Arabia has been trying to improve their relations with the U.S. Of course, they had the setback with the murder of Khashoggi a few years ago, and the Democrats totally shunning them. And remember that the U.S. has bases in Saudi Arabia, but a big air base in Qatar. So there are certainly interests that they have in the region. But I think that their friendship with Israel, and especially Trump's personal liking, is something beyond normal international relations. Let's put it this way.
Right, it's beyond just normal international relations. But very quickly, a follow-on. We saw that press conference where, President Trump boldly announcing this new plan for the United States in Gaza Strip. And you had Benjamin Netanyahu with him. Do you believe, looking at that press conference, was Prime Minister Netanyahu in on this proposal for the US to take over the Gaza Strip? His body language didn't indicate he knew what was coming.
I believe that he was taken off guard a bit in this issue. Yes, Trump had mentioned before that he would like to see some people leave for some time so they could renovate. There's a lot of rubble. It's not really living conditions in most of the area in Gaza. And some of the refugees who had left to the southern strip and were now, because of the ceasefire, allowed to go back north were quite surprised negatively to find out that they actually have nowhere to return to. And many of them have made their way back also, believing that where they were before in the temporary shelters, they get food and other supplies.
Yes.
Especially since we have a few days now of very bad and wet weather in the region, and therefore I think that Netanyahu knew that this was in play, but to such an extent, and some people even say that Trump has even bolder plans for the region.
Right.
I think looking at the body language and knowing how Netanyahu thinks. I think he was actually surprised and taken off guard. You saw him
Yes.
warming up to the idea, though.
Yes.
It helps him a lot with his internal issues with his coalition back here in Israel.
Right, it does indeed. And, I was looking at the destruction in Gaza, Itai. You know, the UN estimates that the war has littered Gaza with 50 million tons of rubble, roughly 12 times the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And they say that with 100 trucks working full time, it would take 15 years to clear the rubble away. There's little space there in the narrow coastal territory that's home to 2.3 million Palestinians. Savio, you've written on this. You've, of course, traveled there to the region. Why do you think this is a proposal that could work? What are the things that you could watch out for in this? What's the minefield that Trump could be walking in with this very controversial proposal?
Well, I don't really think it's controversial, because I think the controversy will be created by people who are not objective and not forward-thinking. Now you've got the problem that is rightfully, as you said, that the UN has stated. So you're going to take 15 years to actually redevelop Gaza. So I think Trump is looking at it purely from a humanitarian point of view, and also from a business point of view. After all, he is a businessman.
Yes.
And his business was real estate.
Right.
So he's looking at converting Gaza, which is a beautiful piece of land, into the Riviera of the Middle East. So I think we have to look at it from that perspective. When you had the conflict with Israel several years ago, you had the US, you had Qatar, you had Israel try to work with the people of Palestine and give them an opportunity to have socio-economic welfare inside of Gaza, and to run, run the things for themselves by bringing in people that they thought that they could work with. But what happened instead? You had Hamas, which is a terror organization, fueled terrorism in Gaza, and therefore some people who were genuinely not connected to the terror activities were left to deal with the terrorists that were running roost at that point of time.
Yes.
So I think right now we have to understand one thing. The world is dealing with Islamic terrorism, Islamic radicalism. Hamas, in its ideology, its behavior, is not going to change at all. But we have to look after and safeguard the people of Palestine that genuinely want to have development, that genuinely want to have socio-economic welfare.
Yes.
How is that going to happen? With Gaza being in troubles right now.
Yes.
Let's also look at the other problem. Why are the Arab nations not taking in the Palestinians?
Right.
Because they believe that the Palestinians do not contribute to the development that other Arab nations have been seeing over a period of time, that have stayed away from Islamic radicalism. And that's a problem. So you're dealing with a larger problem, and that's why I support Donald Trump. It might seem controversial to a lot of people, but I think there is a method behind the madness. I think you're looking at a man who's thinking largely on the larger interest of the Middle East. He's seeing that terrorism, Islamic radicalism is a problem. And if you want to develop Gaza so that the Middle East remains stable and the conflict between Israel and Hamas or Hezbollah does not continue, then there has to be socio-economic development. But socio-economic development cannot happen when Gaza is in trouble.
Yes.
Right? The Palestinians have to move for some time, which I think will be temporary. He will be able to, under US control, rebuild Gaza, and then the right kind of people who want to move into Gaza from the Middle East can move into Gaza. I think it's a brilliant idea in my limited opinion. And having tracked Donald Trump and the Palestine-Israel concern, I think it is actually a genuinely master move, to be made in the long run of how to deal with people who are genuinely good people and how to deal with Islamic radicals who turn into Islamic terrorists. Because you have to eradicate the Hamas.
Absolutely, and that was one of the stated objectives that Prime Minister Netanyahu outlined, which doesn't seem to have succeeded, Savio, because looking at the numbers of Hamas militants there seem to have bounced right back. But, General Meston, I want to come to you now. As Savio was mentioning, the fact that everything has been tried in Gaza, it looks like the politicians have, tried their luck with the Gaza Strip. The military solution has been tried, and now it looks like we're looking at a real estate mogul to turn politician to now, it's his turn to solve the Gaza Strip problem. But you see anything coming out of this? What kind of international laws would Donald Trump be up against if he were to move the people of Gaza out? There would be a lot of laws, international laws that he could possibly violate. Give us a take on this, based on your experience with the United Nations in West Asia.
Good question. As regards the international law is concerned, I think in the last decade or so, really leading countries, for example, what's happening in Russia, Ukraine,
yes.
Now what has happened in Israel, Hamas, I think international law and the United Nations as an organization has taken a big beating, and therefore international law, or even look at China, international law is today relegated to the background. Now what is happening is whoever has might, economic might, military might, and political might, those kind of countries feel the urge to dictate things and take their things own way.
Right.
However, what in this President Trump's case, what I feel, see, he's now actually started feeling like, and you asked a very appropriate question, was Netanyahu aware about it?
Yes.
I also feel he was probably not aware, he was caught unaware.
He was blindsided, it looks like, yes.
Yeah. And what it amounts to that President Trump today has become one-man army.
Yes.
Yes, agree to his background, he's a real estate and he knows to negotiate, hard negotiations. So this plan, what he has done, it's a controversial plan. If you see all this, few announcements which he has made, everywhere he is doing a little, I would say, a little decline. For
right.
example, he had given firm dates with Mexico and Canada, and
yes.
then he spoke to the two of them, and now he said after 1 month, and there is a decline. Similarly with China. So I think his strategy is, at the initial start, give
yes.
a heavy jolt
yes.
to someone, so that everyone is jolted, and thereafter people know that this is where he can reach.
Right.
And since he can reach that, so other party also will start feeling that yes, that is his end state. So
yes.
therefore we have to be on the negotiation side. So therefore now, at this announcement, as on date, Saudi Arabia has not liked this offer at all. They
yes.
have condemned it. Jordan and Egypt have refused to take these refugees, and that is why I'm telling it
yes.
is one-man army. When those host countries, that is Egypt and Jordan, are refusing to take these Palestinians,
yes.
how can President Trump force these countries to take them on board?
How can they? So, yeah, indeed. So it's my way or the highway, as you said, General Meston. That seems to be Donald Trump's policy moves for the second term of his government. But, Itai, coming back to you, what is the fate of the Abraham Accords going to be? Because Saudi Arabia and the other GCC countries have come out very strongly in response to President Trump's statement. They've said there is no way but for a Palestinian state. There is no other way for it but for the Palestinian state, and that is the end state for them. What will happen to the Abraham Accords now if, the Trump plan is realized? The fact is that if they take over the Gaza Strip, there doesn't seem to be much of the Palestinian state that will be left after that.
Your question is a good one, and it's part of a much larger question, which is, will this happen? Who objects? But before that, just want to touch on international law.
Yes.
Notice that maybe the only applicable, and law is a bit of a big word, but the convention here, the Geneva Convention, does not allow someone who conquers land
yes.
to forcibly remove its population.
Article 49.
Yes. Sorry? Yeah. So I don't think that if Trump now comes and offers the money or evacuation or whatever, he will be breaking any international law. And then again, I'm not sure that he cares too much about international law. But back to your first question, there are three groups who are opposing this for real, and then there's a choir that is opposed to it because they want to say the right thing.
Right.
So if you look at the people who are mainly opposed, one is the extremist. Yes, most people of Gaza support Hamas, but at the end, if they're offered a way out and a good life, most of them will actually be happy to take it. But the extremists, of course, are against. They want to stay there, not because they want to build a lovely and thriving area, which they could
yes.
have done when Israel left almost 20 years ago
yes.
and left them to run their own thing with a neighboring Muslim country, and that didn't work. So therefore, you will see the extremists are against. The PLO is, of course, very much against because they
yes.
feel it diminishes their opportunity to build a Palestinian state, even though remember that they have not been controlling since 2007 when Hamas took over Gaza Strip. It's not been really a part of their area of rule. They even stopped paying the salaries of their own employees there. And remember that Gaza is separated from what is called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria in our jargon. And many of the things in the plan were how to connect those two areas without having Israel check who is going from where and how, and train lines and underground, etc. So in essence, he is against that because he does not want to be the leader of the Palestinian people when they lose an important asset. Right. And also big objections, which we heard, are from Jordan and Egypt. Yes. Egypt knows very well who we're dealing with. Remember, they shared a border with them for many years, and they have not been enjoying this too much. And the Muslim Brotherhood is a big problem for Egypt as well as for other Muslim countries. Yes. Jordan, which today has a majority of Palestinians, but back in the 70s, for those older, remember what happened between Jordan and the Palestinian Freedom Movement, and them forcing the PLO out, then to Lebanon with a big bloodshed. So Jordan, even though it's majority Palestinian, and even the crown prince is actually Palestinian, his mother's Palestinian, they are not happy to get more Palestinians. But then if you look at the number of around 2 million people, and assuming that not all of them will leave, in the war in Syria, the civil war displaced many millions. Turkey has more than 3 million still Syrians there. Jordan has 700,000. But even if you look to Europe, Europe is hosting probably around 2 million Syrian refugees today. Right. And none of them seem to want to go back despite Assad being dethroned. So therefore, it is, if you set your mind to it, it can be done. Again, we've seen Trump steamroll people who are against his programs. You mentioned some of the countries earlier on. Yes. And the fact that we hear strong voices from the Abraham Accords, I think that if they see that it's happening and Trump is steamrolling it, and they don't have to pay a price personally because they will not be getting the refugees, they will in the end be happy because the Abraham Accords are here to stay, and they will actually be enlarge the circle with new countries joining, like Saudi Arabia itself, possibly some Asian countries, some more African countries. So the Abraham Accords will only get more success from this.
The Abraham Accords could get success from this move. It's a very controversial one, but as you were saying, Savio, this possibly could work when everything else has failed. And you know, the Gaza Strip, I was just looking at the map, it's 360 square kilometers. It's an area half the size of Mumbai, and it has the population of a small Indian state like Nagaland. It's a very densely populated part of the world. But Savio, what are the other big complications that you could be looking at for a plan like this to be implemented? Donald Trump has actually thrown a bomb into this whole thing, that he's completely upended the way that we were looking at this problem. He's given it a very real estate kind of a solution. And there was Jared Kushner just last year, he was talking about this as a real estate project as well. What do you see are the pitfalls in implementing this, other than the ones that we've just already discussed? How could this mass of people be displaced? Itai was of course mentioning there are many countries in the world who have taken refugees, but to displace 2 million Palestinians at a time like this, which country in the world would want such a large number of politically active people who would then start their own political mobilization, and you have the fear that there could be the Muslim Brotherhood sneaking back in. So what are the big pitfalls really for this large mass of people to be resettled?
So, I'd written an article a couple of weeks ago where I compared Donald Trump to the character played by Heath Ledger in the movie The Dark Knight, and where I termed Donald Trump as a Joker. So I didn't mean it in a negative way. I meant it purely as a comparison to the kind of method in the madness that the world sees as madness, but there appears to be a method. So you're dealing with an immovable object meeting an unstoppable force. Right. Okay. Donald Trump is an unstoppable force, and whatever the world thinks about, the normal way of working, is the immovable object. So obviously you're going to have a friction towards it. But I don't think Donald Trump is going to stop at Gaza alone. I think he's going to go after the West Bank as well. Right. Okay. Now, I'll tell you why whatever limited understanding I have of him from an analytical point of view, I believe peace and stability in the region seems to be the objective of Donald Trump.
Yes.
And in order to do that, he needs to be able to ensure that the Islamic terrorism that plagues that region is dealt with. And the area which Islamic terrorism seems to metamorphosize mostly is between the Hamas and the Palestinians and even the guys at West Bank, though they are a little subdued at this point of time. So he wants to have and ensure that his closest partner in the Middle East, which is Israel, continues to remain safe and sound, and further growth, socio-economic growth of the Middle Eastern region, which US wants to play a very constructive role in, continues to remain unhampered. So he's not against the Palestinian people. Let us understand that first clearly. What he's trying to do is actually very practical, because by the admission of the United Nations itself, it's going to take 15 years to redevelop that place.
Absolutely.
So are you saying that the Palestinians for 15 years are going to be living in rubble? No. So I think what he's trying to do is temporarily move them to a different country so that they continue to do what they do as far as their occupations are concerned, while he continues to redevelop Gaza as a part of the US and make it socio-economically compatible with what else is happening in the Middle East.
Yes. Thank you. Savio, I'm afraid we're completely out of time here, but yeah, that's a very valid point there, what you've just said. And in fact, our esteemed panelists have also said the same thing, that it seems outrageous to think, but there is a certain method in the madness. And Donald Trump clearly means well for the region when he's actually rolled this plan out. It might sound a little distressing, but there is something that he has in mind, and we'll have to just wait and watch. No one seems to know what's on Trump's mind, least of all Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was completely blindsided by that statement a couple of hours ago in the White House. But thank you very much, gentlemen, Itai, Melchior, General Mestone, and of course Savio Rodriguez, for joining us this evening.